welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing with you the long-awaited birth story of my sweet girl. So she was a surprise ginger baby and she is a little girl. She's very cranky, but here is little Miss Brinley. She's trying to sleep right now, but she's kind of fighting it, so hopefully she'll cooperate for this video. I think she's going through a growth spurt because she's been a bit crabby. But I wanted to finally sit down and share her birth story before I forget all of those like little tiny details that are super easy to forget. So I wanted to sit down and share those with you guys and for my own personal, memory. And for Brinley when she is older. So we're just gonna get right into her birth story. So on July 3rd, 2019, I sat down after I put my son to bed and I noticed that I was having contractions. I had been having contractions for days and days and days at this point, and they just weren't doing anything. They weren't that consistent. They were very frequent, but they weren't consistent, if that makes sense. So I sat down and I noticed that my contractions were about every 10 minutes apart and they were very regular, and I felt like they were getting a little bit more intense. So they were very consistent, so I had been timing them, but then around midnight they started to kind of like fizzle out a little bit. Like they were still coming, but they weren't every single 10 minutes. So I decided, you know what, I'm gonna go to bed and get some rest because I felt like I was in labor, but I didn't know for sure. So I decided I'm gonna go to bed, get some rest, because if this is labor, obviously I wanna get as much sleep as possible. So around midnight, give or take, I went to bed. And I was able to sleep just fine, no issues. I still was having the contractions when I went to bed, but they weren't like crazy intense or anything. I just could tell they were there. They were more intense than they had been. And I was pretty sure I was in labor, but I didn't like need to go in or anything. I did text my dad because he's the one that was staying home with our Easton. So yep, I went to bed and at 4:30 a.m., like on the dot, I woke up with a really intense contraction. And from then on, they were about every 5 minutes apart. So I don't know if I was still having contractions while I was sleeping. I must have been. But yeah, at 5:30 a.m., I woke up, really intense contractions. I went downstairs, went to the bathroom just to see if like maybe my bladder was full and it was triggering some contraction. Went back to bed, had another really intense contraction. I woke up my husband and I told him that I was having contractions, and I let him keep sleeping, but I said I was gonna go downstairs and start timing them. So I went down and they continued to be every 5 minutes apart. So at this point I texted my dad because he had to come here and he was driving an hour to get here to watch our son, and then we had an hour drive to the hospital. So, and they were opposite directions, so it's not like we could meet on the way. So every 5 minutes apart, I told my dad, don't come yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm in labor and the contractions are 5 minutes apart. I said, don't come yet, but I gave him like another 20 minutes and I called him and I said, you know what, I think you better come because they are pretty intense and I'm almost positive I'm in labor. So then I went upstairs, got my husband, had him come down. I asked him to make me some crepes for breakfast because I wanted like a good breakfast before I went into the hospital. I was just laboring, trying to get like the last minute things for my hospital bag that I had to grab last minute and stuff. So I grabbed those. My dad came. I wanted to wait until my son woke up that morning before I went to the hospital because I wanted to say goodbye to him. Like not goodbye for good, but it was really, really hard for me to leave him, especially being that this was a VBAC birth attempt. And there is a little bit of extra risk with that, and I had a really strong fear of leaving him and going to the hospital and not making it through the birth. So I wanted to make sure I could see him before I left. So once he woke up, I said goodbye to him, we got him breakfast, and then my husband and I got into the car and left. And that car ride was horrible, let me just say. I didn't have a ton of contractions. I was actually really surprised, but like just sitting in a car and not being able to move how you need to move when you're having a contraction is so uncomfortable, so awful. So like I said, we had about like a 45-minute hour drive to the hospital. I called them on the way and told them we were coming. So they had a room all ready for us. We were the only ones at the hospital. Keep in mind, it's a pretty small hospital, but we are the only ones in like the OB part of the hospital. So we had nurses all to ourselves. Get there, and they didn't seem like they believed me that I was in labor, to be honest. So with my son, I had a C-section. He was an emergency C-section, went in at 36 weeks for decreased movement, and he was in severe distress. So they had to get him out as soon as possible. So that's the background on that. So this time I wanted a VBAC. I wanted to do a normal natural birth. So when I went there, they knew I had never experienced labor before, never had a contraction, none of that. And I don't think they believed me that I was in labor because they were just like not treating it like it was real labor. And I was very, very calm. I wasn't freaking out during contractions or anything. They were coming very consistent, but I don't know if they, or I think they might have thought I was in labor, but the very early stages. Anyway, they got me all like admitted and everything, go through like all those big long questionnaires. And then they admitted me, they checked me, and they were very surprised to find out that I was at 5 centimeters dilated, because at my doctor's appointment just a few days prior, I was completely closed, no dilation. I was thinned out quite a bit, but not dilated at all. And her head was very low at that appointment, so my doctor thought, you know, labor was kind of near, but there's really no way to tell. So anyway, they were very surprised when I was already at 5 centimeters dilated when they checked me. That was at 10:30 a.m. was when they actually checked me for the first time. So after that, they had to have me on the monitors for a while, just because VBAC, more risky, and I had to make sure she was okay. So I labored in the bed for a little bit. And then once they got like a really good stable reading, they let me get up, walk around for half an hour, and, or no, like 45 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, something like that. And by that time it was noon, and they wanted to check me again, and I was at 6 centimeters. So I dilated another centimeter during that like 45 minutes or whatever. And again, they needed me to stay in bed for a little bit just to monitor her heart rate. My hospital does not have the portable monitors. You have to be attached to them in the bed, which stinks, but that's just how my hospital is. It's a small hospital. So I laid on my side because that's where they were getting the best reading, but the contractions got so intense so quickly, and I was in so much pain. I had my husband applying counter pressure on my back, and it was working really, really well. But at this point it started to like stop working as well. I think it was partly that position. But anyway, they got a good enough reading for a little bit, and then they let me get up and get into the tub. So when I got into the tub, things got really intense, really, really fast. And I was having a really hard time coping through the contractions. They were so intense. And I had just gotten checked maybe half an hour earlier, and I was at 6 centimeters. So I knew I wasn't that close, but I was in active labor for sure. And I was in there for probably about 20 minutes, and things got unbearable by that 20-minute, 30-minute mark. I was like screaming for somebody to help me because it hurt so bad, and I had so much back labor. So I had no pain meds up to this point. I did not want anything. I did not want an epidural. There's nothing wrong with it, but I just did not want that. I wanted to experience like real raw birth, and I didn't want any interventions just because I know, you know, more risk to lead to complications. My water had not broken yet, and the nurse came in and she asked if they want the water broken just to speed things along and get her out. And I was really debating, but I decided that I didn't want any intervention just because, you know, sometimes even breaking water can like cause a baby to go into distress. So I decided against that. Again, really intense at this point, and I felt like I had to push already. I had just gotten checked, you know, not that far before, or not that long ago. But I told the nurse, I'm like, I need to push. So she kind of finally listened to me, and I got up out of the tub. As soon as I stood up and like went to sit down on the chair that she had, my water broke. Like the big old gush. It wasn't a trickle, it was a big gush of fluid. And then it got really, really real. The nurse was like, oh, okay, we got to get you into bed right now, because I think she started to believe that, oh, okay, you actually might need to push. So we got into bed right away, or I got into bed right away, should I say. And the nurse checked me. She's like, oh, okay, you're at 10 centimeters. So I'm like, I got to push right now, because it was so much pressure. I do not understand how they tell you don't push when you absolutely need to push. I'm assuming it's different when you have an epidural, because you probably don't feel as much pain with the pressure, but like when you have no medication and you need to push, it hurts when you can't, like you need to. So I didn't really start pushing, like actively pushing, but I wasn't trying to prevent it, basically. The doctor came in within probably a minute. Like they knew they had to get him in there. And because I was a VBAC, you know, they wanted to have a doctor there for sure. So the doctor came in, he checked me and said, yep, we're good, you can start pushing. I said I didn't want to push laying down, but they said it was easier and better position and stuff to get started. Anyway, I ended up in that position the entire time, and that was okay with me. I wasn't uncomfortable or anything. So I started pushing at 2:15, which was, let's see, I got there at 10:30 a.m. and was admitted at 5 centimeters, and I was pushing by 2:15. So it was a very quick labor. And then as far as delivery, I started pushing. It was so intense right away, and once I calmed down through the contractions, pushing was so much easier. I just needed to like calm down. And I strongly feel that my transition during labor was way more painful than pushing. I did not feel, I mean, pushing was painful, but it was almost, you were like getting relief from pushing, if that makes sense, because there's so much pressure. So if you have had a natural delivery, you probably know what I'm talking about. But I felt so much in my lower back, it killed me. And then at one point I was pushing, and it must have been when she was turning or something, and it was so intense in my back, like I just wanted to cry for a second there. And then once I got through that, it wasn't near as bad. The ring of fire that everyone talks about, also didn't think it was that bad. I mean, it hurt, but I thought transition was worse. But that's kind of besides the point. I pushed, her head came out, and with that same push, her entire body came out. She literally just like, poof, came all out at once. I always thought that it was head first, and then that next push would be the body, but no, it was just all one big old push. So I pushed total for 45 minutes, which I don't think is too bad for a first time. I mean, they really look at you as a first time mom, because I've never given birth vaginally before. So anyway, yeah, I pushed for 45 minutes, and at 3:01, this little girlie came into the world, and it was the best moment ever. With my son, I never got that, and it was so amazing. So came out, and they immediately put her on my chest, and within probably 10-15 minutes she was nursing. She has been a champ nurser this whole time. She's done so well. She latched immediately and have had no issues since. So I'm really lucky, because again, that experience with my son was also very challenging. Yeah, that is her birth story. She is doing so good. She is, let's see, she's 7 weeks right now, so she's almost 2 months old already, which is why I needed to film this video, because I don't want to forget all those little details. But it was such a special experience. And if you are trying to decide if you want to have a VBAC or a vaginal birth after cesarean, I would say go for it. It was the most healing and best experience of my life. Transition was very painful, but it was the most healing birth ever. It was perfect, absolutely perfect, and the birth that I've like always dreamed of and like longed for. After I had my son, it was just, I was like heartbroken that I didn't get the opportunity to be in labor. in any of that. It was so hard, and her birth was just like so healing for me, and I'm so thankful that I had a doctor that encouraged me to do that. I never mentioned this, but my doctor, who has been with me since I had my son, she did my emergency C-section because my midwife could not, and she's been with me this whole time. She was not the one to deliver this little girly, and that is because she was gone for a couple of days, but that's okay. Well, she has been an amazing baby. I will probably do like a newborn update kind of video, just kind of recapping the first few months of her life. And she has been a little sweetheart. We love her to pieces. And yeah, I just wanted to share my birth story with you guys, or should I say her birth story. And it was the best experience. If you are new to my channel, I make motherhood, lifestyle content, and finally getting back into the swing of filming now that kind of the chaos of the newborn phase is over, or almost over. So if you would like to see any of that type of content, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! I lose my breath